species, the prairie stream species, since the 1800s have gone down substantially. And things like bluegill, sunfish, and basses that we tend to put into reservoirs have gone up since that time. So we're altering the system substantially. And the particular species that are having trouble are the ones that have adapted. This is work that Keith and Giddo Institutes have done, have adapted this strategy of broadcasting their eggs so they float downstream until the larvae are able to come out of the eggs and swim. And if those eggs sink, they can't develop. They get smothered down in the sediment. And so in fragmenting these streams, either by having no flow or having reservoirs in between the periods between them, they're not able to reproduce successfully. And this is, I think, one of the why I would call the current drought a pinch point, because historically these streams would have kept flowing from the groundwater, supporting them. But now we have them fragmented and dry areas, and I think we'll lose a species or two in this. It'll be that pinch point. They push them to the edge and then push them over the edge of drought. So going back to this idea of streams having good water quality, and another thing that's changed is we've had a lot of woody expansion. What's the influence of increased woodiness? And talk about our research on flood drought and a little bit of patch burn grazing. And then I'll talk about some big grants that we've got going here and just describe them to you a little bit. So as I said, Jim put weirs in 4 watersheds, N2, N4, N1, and N20. And then each of these dots is actually a water quality monitoring station that we have long-term data on. And perhaps you'll see Amanda Cool out, or some of the undergraduates out, sampling these spots. And then we've actually added sampling in on Shane Creek, because that's where the patch burn grazing is going. And this map was made before we added that particular siting. And so we have basically different watershed treatments, burning and grazing. And these are some things that you already know, the other information you know about. And so what is the effect of these fires and these bison on the water quality? And our long-term data suggests that fire and bison grazing have some detectable effects, but very modest effects on water quality and the species that are present in the streams. This is in contrast to when large fires happen in forested areas, particularly in the west, where you get huge pulses of ash moving through the system, high concentrations of ammonium that are toxic to the organisms, and you have very large biotic effects. It turns out in prairie streams, the fires, we don't get much ash working its way in. And this is basically, again, coming back to some research that Jim did a number of years ago, where he looked at how much rain it takes to get sediments flowing across the surface of the prairie. Even right after it's burned, you don't get much sheet flow across the surface and much transport of sediment or ash because little stubbles of grass sort of stop it, and then there's these little cracks that go down into the limestone, and it can go down in as opposed to flowing across the surface. We're starting to find out that cattle have stronger effects, that they really bump up coliform counts, that is the bacterial counts in the streams, whereas bison, we can't detect their effect on that. They bump up nutrient concentrations even more than bison do. Bison do measurably, but not as much. And they increase the rate of sediment more than bison. And this is because the cattle have a fundamentally different behavior with respect to the streams. They're less efficient with their water, and so they need to be in the streams drinking water more. And also when it's hot, they tend to move down into shady areas, move down and stand in the water and crap and mess things up, right? I mean, everyone's seen cattle on the Flint Hills and what they do when it's hot out. The bison are more bugged by the bugs, I think, and so they go up on the uplands where there's wind and there's the food that they prefer. And turns out some of the work that Jesse Nippert has done suggests that they actually get a substantial amount of their water, either from the food they eat or from these bison wallows that are up higher in the watersheds. And when they go to the water, they do go through the streams. They do drink. They tend to go in single file. And so we see these trails that work their way through the streams. And you've all seen the bison trails out there, so you know what I'm talking about. Cattle don't do that. They just smear the banks out and they rub on the trees and make more of a mess. We've got some pastime grazing research that's going on in Docent Prairie, which is down south of Nevada in Missouri. It's a much smaller area, but there's watersheds that are fenced with cattle that have riparian fencing, without riparian fencing, and those without any cattle. And we can see those effects, and this fencing mitigates some of these effects. So for what it's worth, if people fence cattle away from the streams, you can get rid of many of the negative environmental effects of cattle. Woody expansion. So this is the weird. Gosh, it must have just been installed in 1986. So was that 85 or 84 that went in? I think
About 85.
And this is a meeting that came out to have a tour here. Jim's even giving the tour. I don't know. It's Dick Marzoff I've served this. But the point here is that you look at the trees around that weir there, and then 2006, look what's happened, how much it's grown up since then. So we have this big change that's ongoing on Konza. And these are data that John Briggs put together in a bioscience article. And we see that the first aerial photographs indicate modest amounts of green along the stream channels. That's woody vegetation. And we see that by about 1985, it's spreading, and it's spreading up the stream channels, right? So when the woody comes in, it tends to first be on the stream channels and then move out to the rest of the prairie. It also appears to be spreading from the Kansas River area down. If you look at it, started up in the upper left-hand corner and then spread down. Probably because of the source of propagule being the woody vegetation associated with the Kansas River, and we don't have as much woodiness down to the south and to the east of us. And this is just some more detailed look at 3 watersheds annually burned where you get almost no woodiness. In the 4-year, where you get a lot of expansion in the 1-year, you get about the same amount of expansion. And then again, you can kind of see the outlines of the streams inside of those watersheds where the woodiness come up. So we're interested in this effect, and we started by doing some fairly small, couple 100-yard removals of woody vegetation around the stream. And this is the one that's up on the nature trail here, up where it's just at the very bottom of what you're getting out of K20. Well, it's not K20 anymore, I don't know what it's called now, but it's burning more often than every 20 years. And you can see that we've done the removal, and if you just look at the corner, that's actually what it looked like before we did the removal. That's kind of the density of vegetation. You know, in the summertime, you just can't even see through that. And these are some docents talking about some here. So sometimes we ask for volunteers, and we get the docents out, and they're a big help. And so the short one, we saw some effects. We did see the algae come up. We saw the food webs change. We didn't see much water quality effect change. But we did see what you predict, that we moved from the invertebrates that eat leaves to the ones that eat algae, as was predicted. And this is just the other site. We did this on N4D up a ways from that weir there. And we can see before the site before removal and afterwards. We opened it out considerably. And then behind here, you can see what it looks like without removal. So you may, when you're doing your walks, you may be able to see, you can still see this site as you walk down along the nature trail. Not this one, the previous site. But one of the questions is, well, what about, so we're seeing actually long-term decrease in water yield on Konza. And one of the ideas is that it could be related to this expansion of woody vegetation. But how do you test this? Well, you do an experiment, you do a manipulative experiment. So you can't do 100 yards and see a difference in discharge. It's just not enough to influence. So we did 4.8 kilometers on N2B of woody removal from all of 100 feet out on either side of the channel. Again, we had docents assisting with that. I think Jim was out there.
Once.
It's pretty hard work.
Twice, actually. First and last time.
Yeah. I don't know, that wasn't a very popular committee. It was a pain in the ass. So this is before, this just happens to be in 2010, and this image was just from this last summer. And the watershed here starts down here, the weirs down here. You can see the watershed that we did the removal is right here. And this is on N1, so it still has the trees before and after. This is sort of a weird watershed. It's got a little bit of another stream in it that we didn't do. But you can see all those dark areas there. That's where there are trees. And they're not there. We don't know what the results are going to be from this because we've had almost no discharge since we did it. We'll have floods, we'll have water, but the graduate students are the ones that suffer. I'll probably still be here. They're the ones that have to scramble and get it in the project. And so this is, looked like a war zone out there. Looked pretty bad, but it turns out that the first fire took a lot of this material out, took it away. And we actually had some experiments, not only the water quality experiments in the aquatic invertebrates, we also had some terrestrial work doing where they tried to reseed areas back to prairie vegetation as opposed to woody. Not a lot of results there because it was so dry, the seeds didn't really turn out very well. They saw some effects. And then, as I said, we burned it. When we burned the watershed, we actually walked the stream channels and kind of helped it along in a few places. And you can imagine that this woodiness really does have some big geomorphological effects, the stuff that Glenn was looking at. Because this is where there were trees growing through the center of the stream channel. And they caught up the woody debris behind them. And then the rocks and gravel built up behind that. So when we take all this out, you're obviously going to get a lot more movement of that bed material downstream. So if you do get up to that watershed, N2 watershed, you can actually see where the back of the watershed was dug out. It looks pretty bad because they pull all the rock and stuff out of there. And they put a big hole down there. And that's going to be lined with some hardware cloth type stuff so that when we can see what the bed movement is. One of the names is the first one to see what the bed movement is. As it comes down, see what the geomorphological effects are in addition to water quality, those things, and discharge. So, what we know so far, it might lower discharge. We're not sure about that yet. We do know that the woody expansion decreases algal growth and production, increases leaf input. It changes the basic biological setup of the community. And it could change water quality, but we don't know that yet. That's to see for the future. Okay, flood and drought. And this is Keith Giddell in a dry stream channel. And then our graduate student, Justin Murdoch, put these exclosures up where he had, where the crayfish and fish could get in, or they were excluded. And we can use these to get an idea. And there's little it's hard to see, there's baskets of rocks down in there. We can use that to see what the effects are on how the stream ecosystem works.